Planting season is not just another time of year for a farmer like me. It is the heartbeat of my entire life, because every seed I put into the soil during those few critical weeks determines whether I feed my family, pay my bills, and keep my land thriving for another year, or fall behind in debt and struggle to survive. So when the earth finally warmed and the days stretched long, I was up before dawn every morning checking the soil moisture, preparing equipment, and making sure my old but reliable tractor was fueled, greased, and ready to run from sunrise to sunset. But as fate would have it, this was the exact moment Karen from the HOA decided that my tractor was an eyesore and a nuisance to her perfect suburban view. Now, let me paint the picture. My land has been in my family for generations, long before this neighborhood of cookie-cutter houses even existed. Back then, the land was open fields and hardworking farmers, but when developers carved it up and sold it off to people like Karen, they brought with them a set of HOA rules that had no place on farmland. Yet somehow they thought they had the right to tell me where and how I should park the machine that quite literally feeds my entire community. Karen was the loudest of them all, always with her manicured nails tapping on her clipboard, always threatening to report me for one thing or another. She had already complained about the sound of my rooster, the smell of manure, and even the way I hung my laundry outside to dry. But this time she crossed a line that I could not ignore. It started one cool April morning. I was fueling my tractor near the road, ready to spend the next 10 hours planting corn, when I saw a tow truck rumbling up the gravel lane. My heart nearly stopped as I realized it was backing toward my tractor. The driver hopped out and started inspecting the machine, and when I demanded to know what he was doing, he said he had been called to tow away an abandoned vehicle parked too close to the road. I was furious because that tractor was anything but abandoned. It was my workhorse, my partner in the fields, and losing it even for a day would destroy my planting schedule. I tried to reason with him, explaining that this was my farm equipment on my property, and that if he hooked it up, my crops would fail and my family would pay the price. But before he could answer, I heard the voice I dreaded the most. Karen was standing on her porch, across the road, coffee cup in hand, smirking like she had just won the lottery. She called out that tractors didn't belong in front yards, and that her HOA rights gave her the authority to have it removed. I clenched my fists so tight my knuckles turned white, but I forced myself to stay calm, because yelling would only give her more satisfaction. Instead, I showed the driver my land permit, and the fact that tractors were obviously not under the same rules as abandoned cars. Thankfully, he was a decent man, and after a few minutes of checking, he admitted the paperwork Karen had filed was invalid, and he couldn't legally tow the tractor. He got back in his truck, muttered something about wasting his time, and drove off, leaving Karen red-faced and fuming. But instead of apologizing, she shouted across the road that this wasn't over and that she would find another way to make sure my rusty old junk disappeared from her sight. I stood there watching her slam her door shut, my blood boiling, because this wasn't about a tractor, it was about respect. She thought her HOA clipboard carried more weight than generations of sweat, blood, and tradition poured into that soil. But I decided then and there that if she wanted a battle, she was going to get one, and she was about to learn that farmers don't give up their land or their tools without a fight. The morning after the tow truck fiasco, Karen doubled down on her crusade against me, as if embarrassing herself in front of the driver and half the neighborhood hadn't been enough, because when I came outside to prep my tractor, I found her shiny silver SUV parked deliberately at the edge of my property, lined half on a road and half on my tilled soil. Her intention was clear. She wanted to make a statement that if my tractor was going to be an eyesore, then she would use her car to block and belittle my work. And to her, this was probably some petty power move. But to me, it was like spitting on generations of effort, because every inch of that soil mattered when it came to planting season. And here, she was treating it like her personal driveway. I stood there staring at her smug expression as she walked over in her yoga outfit, holding another cup of overpriced coffee. She told me in a most condescending tone that if I truly valued my tractor so much, maybe I should tuck it away behind the barn where nobody could see it, since tractors didn't belong in respectable neighborhoods. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of someone moving into a farming community and then complaining about farming equipment, but instead I bit my tongue, smiled politely, and told her she had made her point. Then I walked away, leaving her to believe she had won the little war. What she didn't know was that farmers have a way of getting revenge that doesn't involve shouting or threats, but rather patience. creativity, and a deep understanding of how to use the land that others take for granted. That night, after she went to bed, I fired up my tiller and carefully loosened the soil all around her SUV, making sure not to touch the vehicle itself, but turning the ground beneath and around it into rich, dark seedbed. Then, with the same precision I used in my own fields, I planted rows of corn, beans, and sunflowers around her car, working late into the night under the light of the moon. I watered the soil generously, so that by morning it looked like her SUV had sprouted from the earth itself. When dawn broke, the neighborhood was treated to a sight they would never forget. Karen stormed outside ready for her morning jog, only to freeze in horror at the sight of her precious vehicle surrounded by perfectly planted rows of crops. The neighbors burst out laughing, some even filming on their phones as Karen shrieked that her car had been buried alive. She climbed into the driver's seat and tried to back out, but her tires only spun uselessly against the wet soil, digging her SUV deeper as mud splattered against the shiny paint. The irony was almost poetic. She had wanted to tow away my tractor, but ended up with her car literally stuck in the ground like some stubborn weed, refusing to be pulled. She screamed for help, but the neighbors were too busy recording her meltdown to care. Eventually, she called a tow truck of her own, and when the driver arrived, he couldn't stop laughing at the sight. He had to use special boards and equipment just to drag her car free. By then, the story had already gone viral online because half the neighborhood had uploaded videos with captions like "Karen got planted" and "Farmers always win." The HOA tried to find me, claiming I had damaged her property, but the evidence showed clearly that I had planted crops on my own land, and it was her decision to park where she shouldn't have. So instead of losing money, I actually gained community support. People from town started coming by, offering to buy produce directly from me, and even local businesses pitched in to protect my right to farm. Karen, on the other hand, was humiliated into silence. After that, she stopped complaining about my tractor, stopped calling tow trucks, and every time she drove past my field, she did so quietly without a word, because she had learned the hard way that when you try to uproot a farmer during planting season, you just might end up getting planted yourself.